Hello and welcome to the next edition of the BriefingsDirect Voice of the Analyst podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on the latest insights into successful digital transformation. This Hybrid IT Strategies interview explores how new maturity in the management and composition of multiple facets of IT, from cloud to bare metal services and systems, amount to a culmination of 30 years of IT development. We'll now hear from an IT industry analyst about why, in almost the first time, we're able to gain an uber view over all of IT's reach, and how automation over hybrid and multi-cloud deployments and optimization sets the stage for AIOps. It may mean finally mastering heterogeneity and giving businesses the means to truly manage how they govern and sustain their digital businesses. Here to help us explore the not-too-distant future end state of total IT management is Martin Hingley, President and Market Analyst at IT Candor Limited, based in Oxford, UK. Welcome, Martin.
Oh, hi, Donna. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for joining us. It seems to me, Martin, that we have a lot of moving parts that have been disparate and hard to manage separately, never mind in combination over the past 30 years. But because things have elevated to a services level, because we've been forced to deal with a lot of hybrid this and hybrid that we might actually be getting to the point where we can conquer heterogeneity as a beast, master that beast, if not completely slay it. Do you agree with that? And why is this perhaps a different point in the evolution of IT from the past when it comes to solving management over all of IT?
Well, you talk about 30 years. I've actually been an analyst for 35. So, and it's always been the same. Each generation of systems comes in and takes over from the last, which has always left users with the problem of trying to manage the new with the old. So, I mean, the initial one for me was the client-server thing that happened, I guess, in the late 80s, early 90s, and the influx of PC servers and the wonderful joy of being able to have these new systems that did things you couldn't do centralized. But, of course, the problem was then you couldn't manage them under the same regime. And I guess we've seen a continuous development of that over time. It's a problem that, is different depending on the size of organization you're in, because small, medium companies, at least the smaller of the medium companies, can get by with sort of bundled systems that kind of work fine and use Microsoft operating systems. But the moment you get into the large, medium-sized and larger organizations, you have a huge mixture of resources, if you like. Cloud hasn't helped. Cloud is very different from your internal stuff, the way you program it, the way you develop applications. It has a wonderful cost proposition, at least initially. It has a scalability proposition. But, of course, these companies have to work with all of this. Now, it would be wonderful if we're in a place where we can look at these resources. I think the starting point is to think about things as having a service catalog in the center of your corporate apps. And I think people are beginning, even that as a theory, it doesn't sit in everybody's brain. So, yeah, I think we might get composable stuff. And I like what HP is doing. But I think rather than thinking that everybody's going to go that way, I think I'd put it this way. I think we're now getting to the point where you could do it if you're clever, and so some people will. But it's a difficult, complex subject.
So the idea of everything as a service gives you the opportunity to bring in some new tools. And because organizations are trying to transform themselves digitally, it seems to me that the cloud has almost forced them to advance in how they think about operational and development in tandem. They think about perhaps identifying the most efficient mix or the right mix of cloud and on-premises. And they, of course, also have to adhere to skills issues and make sure that by automating more and more and trying to boil out the complexity, they can actually find the warm bodies to manage all of this. To me, though, this sort of might be a different state. So, as you say, it's difficult, but if 25% of companies start to master this, doesn't that put them in a position of being dominant? Don't they get an advantage over people that don't?
Yes, but my warning from history would be this. With mainframes, we thought we had it all sorted out, and we didn't. We had client-server, and then with mini computers, we thought those Unix systems all have virtualizations and LPARs and all this wonderful stuff. You could isolate the data in one partition from application data from a different application. We had all that. And then, along comes Intel and AMD, and we have x86 servers. So I think the issue is, I think it's an architectural issue rather than a technology issue. So we got cloud, which is very different to the on-premise stuff that you've got, and you've got it. So my warning would be that let's not try and lock things down too much with technology. Let's think about it as an architecture. And if we could do that, maybe we can accommodate neuromorphic and photonic and quantum computing within this regime in future, because the people that really thought they had it worked out in previous generations found that they really hadn't, and that things moved on.
And the way in which the transitions have occurred has actually increased with frequency and accelerated in its pace and impact, right?
Well, I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I mean, basically, this may sound a weird thing to say, but I don't think cloud is a good name anymore. I mean, if you're a software company, you'd be an idiot if you didn't make your products available as a service. And every company in the world uses the cloud at some level. So basically, there's no longer a choice about whether we use the cloud or not. And all those companies that thought they didn't, when people actually looked at them, found that they were using the cloud, in different departments and in the organization. So it's a challenge, but things constantly change. I mean, similarly, if you look over, 20 years' time, we won't talk about the computer industry. I mean, every single physical device we use will have computing in it. And I don't think people like you and me are going to be paid lots of money for talking about IT as if it was a separate issue. It is the world economy today, So how you manage it, it seems amazing that we don't have more schemas for how you actually organize the use of IT. And of course, you've got all sorts of problems like, the hackers trying to get into your systems, using more sophisticated techniques than you are using to defend your systems. So I think the thing evolves the whole time. But yeah, there may be some genuinely new things that fall outside the schema you might introduce to manage things, but pretty much it's possible. It's possible to manage your resources in a coherent way and sit over the top of heterogeneous resources and manage them, I think.
And a sort of tandem trend to that composability possibility is more and more data being available. We talk about the edge, we talk about smart homes, smart cities, but we're also talking about smarter data centers. So we're talking about data from every device in the data center, through the network, to the end device, and even how the users consume services. So we have a plethora of data that we're only starting to mine for improving how IT manages itself. And as we get a better trail of data, we can apply machine learning capabilities, see where the trends are, optimize, and then start to become more intelligent about factoring automation and letting the machines run the machines. So at least that's the vision. Do you think that this data capability has pushed us to a new point where we didn't have that before, and perhaps gets us to that end state that I've been hypothesizing around a different position of manageability?
Yeah, I mean, I think data is an interesting concept. I mean, or a thing. I mean, they say that a jetliner flying across the Atlantic creates 5 terabytes of data, each one, and how many of those fly across the Atlantic every day? I mean, basically, you need sampling techniques to pick out the valuable bits of data, and you can't do it with people. You have to use artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think the other side of it is, of course, data is dangerous. As we see, the EU passing GDPR regulations saying, it's a citizen right within the EU to have their privacy protected and the data associated with them protected. So we've got all sorts of interesting things going on. The data is exploding. People aren't filtering it properly yet, and then we've got potential things in the future like autonomous cars, which are going to create massive amounts of data. And you think about the security implications of somebody hacking into your braking system when you're doing 70 miles an hour on a motorway. Again, we need to think in broader terms, in sort of meta terms, I think. I always use the parable of the seeds. You remember some of the seed falls on fallow ground, some of it falls in the middle of the field. And basically data for me is like that. You need to work out which bits of it you need to use. You need to filter it in order to get some reasonable stuff out of it. And then you need to make sure that whatever you're doing is legal. I mean, it's going to be fun.
So if businesses, though, are tasked with this data management problem as you've defined it, but regardless of what industry you're in, it seems to me that you ought to get your own house in order first in your own IT organization across a vast heterogeneity of systems, deployments, and data types before you can then master the data equation for your line of business applications and services. So how important is it for AIOps, as some people call it, that is applying AI principles to the operations of your data centers? Is that something that we should be pushing out to the future, or maybe something that's time has come?
I think you have to do it. I mean, so if you look at GDPR or Sarbanes-Oxley before that, the challenge here is you need a single version of the truth. I know lots of organizations, even a couple I've worked for, that didn't have a single version of the truth. If we'd been subpoenaed to, supply every email that had the word Monte Carlo in it, we couldn't have done it. We probably had 25 copies of all the emails we'd ever sent, but we had no way of organizing it. So data governance is hugely important, but it's not a nice to have, it's an essential to have. And the new regulations are coming, and it's not just the EU, GDPR is being adopted in lots of countries outside. We've got the state of California just about to introduce some fantastic stuff. So I think it's essential to get your own house in order in terms of it. And again, there's so much data in your own organization that you're going to have to use AI and machine learning in order to be able to manage it. And it has to go into IT ops. So I don't think it's a choice. I don't think many people are there yet. I think it's a must do.
All right. So we've heard from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise about this concept of a composable cloud. And that includes having an opportunity to get the right mix of network as a fabric. So I think that's really elevating software-defined networking to a manageability benefit. Also looking at the data equation, as we've talked about, and then bringing a standardized API approach to the deployment of cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. Is this part of the right direction to go? Should companies be thinking about doing this individually, or do they really need a common denominator of sorts to help sort through the complexity and build perhaps a one-throat-to-choke approach to the management of this vast heterogeneity?
Oh, my God, what a question. I don't know. I like what HP is doing. I think in particular mixing the different resources. So you've also got GreenLake underneath that, you can pay for what you use. By the way, the OPEX-CAPEX equation, right? So I've been an analyst for 35 years. If every time the industry started talking about the need to move from CAPEX to OPEX actually shifted, we'd be at 200% OPEX right now. The thing is that in bad times, we move towards OPEX. In good times, we secretly creep back towards CAPEX because it has financial advantages. You have to mix all of these things. But I do like what HP is doing. HPE, I should say. Is it, and I use this word architecture, I got into trouble in this conference with talking about architecture, but for me it's the potential of doing this, the fabric approach, the software-defined approach, the API connections are essential, I think, to move forward. You have to get beyond point products. I hope that HP and maybe a couple of other vendors will propose something that's very useful that helps people sort this new world out.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been exploring how new maturity in management and composition has the opportunity to be a culmination of 30 years of IT development. And we've learned how gaining an uber view over IT's reach might finally be possible due to automation over multi-cloud deployments, hybrid cloud deployments, and optimizing legacy IT assets as well. So please join me in thanking our guest. We've been here with Martin Hingley. He's president and market analyst at IT Candor Limited in Oxford, UK. Thank you, sir.
No problems. Thank you.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining us for this BriefingsDirect Voice of the Analyst Hybrid IT Management Strategies interview. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your IT community and do come back next time.